Several years ago, on a road trip we were taking through New Mexico, somewhere between Taos and Santa Fe, we stopped at a vineyard. They had a very swanky front building, and in there they were offering free samples of wine as an incentive, or just to loosen you up enough to buy a bottle or two or more. Now, I know absolutely nothing about wine, so I found myself wandering around outside on the edge of the vineyard. It was huge, stretching out on this hillside as far as the eye could see. And a woman walked up to say hello to me, and it turns out she was one of the owners of the whole place. So I asked her how long the vineyard had been there, and she told me that they had started it from scratch 20 years before. I admitted my complete ignorance about growing grapes, and so I asked how long it took them to get things started before they were actually able to produce any wine from this vineyard. She said, well, about 2 years gets the plants established so that they can start producing fruit. Then it was about 10 years before we actually made any profit, and that wasn't much. You don't get into this to make money anyway, she said. So I said, wow, did you know all of that before you started, that it would take so long? She said, yeah, in this business, you've really got to believe in what you're doing and do it for the right reasons. You want to make a living, of course, but it's the wine that matters most. People find joy in good wine, so we find joy in making it for them. Well, after that testimony, we had to buy a bottle of wine for a friend. Her speech worked on me because I believe she genuinely cared about what she was doing. She cared about making people joyful. Now, it might not be surprising to hear me say this, but I love the church. I love the people who make up the church and why the church exists in the first place. It's a community gathered around a common cause, a joyful cause. People need community and belonging and authentic relationships. In life, everyone gets wounded and confounded, and we can all feel lost. So it's good to have other people to share your journey, and it's good to have a safe place to feel connected to God. So church is very personal and very communal all at the same time. People need spiritual nurture and ways to express gratitude for the gift of life and love by helping others, to help others find that for themselves, and to help others who simply need help. Because we are put here, I believe, to help, to serve. That's how we find out who we are and why we are. So that's a pretty darn good cause. And I love the church because I'm idealistic and I'm optimistic. I always believe that our best days are ahead of us, no matter how many great things have come before. And I always believe that our challenges, no matter how big and how scary they may seem, are merely opportunities in disguise. I believe in taking chances because life is short, the clock is ticking, and we've been given this brief moment in time to help make the world a better place. The world can be pretty hurtful at times. We know that. So I believe the healing that we seek, the answers we crave, the wholeness we desire, and the peace we need can be found in the hands and hearts and voices of others who are going through all the same stuff we experience universally. Everyone goes through. It can be found in having faith in each other, and that's important because I think that the faith we have in each other is part and parcel of the faith that we have in God. In my understanding of how things work, we see and we know how God works through the ways we live with each other. If we believe in God's trust and care and presence and forgiveness and love, where did we learn those things to begin with? And how do we see them played out every single day? In each other. And we also know that none of us are perfect and that we all mess up. That we're all works in progress and that we're on a journey of discovery together. We can't see over the next hill or around the next bend in the road, but we have faith that it'll be fine because we're traveling together. What motivates me to get up every morning and do what I do is that faith, believing in what is not yet fully seen. all the possibilities, all the hope. Now, it's not a surprise to a lot of you, but I'm not a very doctrinaire person. So all the persnickety details that go into having a particular kind of faith, really, that stuff matters less to me personally than just having faith itself. The faith that we are made for a higher purpose than serving ourselves. The faith that we're all basically cut from the same bolt of cloth, even if we might each have variations of color or texture or pattern. The faith that there's a God who loves us no matter what, and that love isn't only unconditional, but it lasts forever, and that sharing that love with others, that's what matters most. Again, that is a great cause. It's good to be part of something like that, this thing that we call a church. And when I say that, I'm reminded of that vineyard owner. Why does someone put in decades of hard work way out on a big patch of desert soil in New Mexico with no guarantee of success or riches? Because growing grapes is just a whole lot of fun? No, it's because they believe in something. They have faith in something, hope in something. They have a cause. In their case, to create something that brings other people joy. I think it's good to remind ourselves now and then of why it is that each of us, as alike as we may be and as unique as we may be, choose to come together as a church in the first place. It's good to remind ourselves of our cause. Now, one day Jesus had a conversation with his followers. They felt compelled to remember and repeat this so that thousands of years later we would also get to hear it. Jesus was just a master of using metaphor, and in that conversation he refers to God as a vine grower and to himself as the vine. His followers, back then and today, are the branches of the vine, he says. Some branches of the vine bear fruit, grapes popping out in big bunches everywhere, and some branches just don't. The branches that don't bear fruit have somehow lost their connection to the vine, to Jesus. In his words, they don't abide in him. The branches that produce a lot of grapes have kept or reclaimed that connection, so they are abiding in him. Now, over the years, that story about a vineyard has unfortunately caused people in churches lots of anxiety, mostly because you hear it and you think about grapes, right? So go ahead, picture big bunches of grapes on the vine, and you relate the grapes to people, numbers of people. Now that may not be how you think about it, but it's become the common wisdom that this metaphor about a vineyard has to do with how well your church is growing or not. So if your church is not growing numerically, this story is an indictment. You must be doing something wrong. You must not be abiding in Jesus somehow. I think that's kind of harsh. And I really don't think that's what Jesus was saying anyway. There are plenty of small churches that are wonderful and doing great stuff. And there are plenty of really gigantic churches that appear to me to be more about serving their own needs rather than serving the needs of others. So for me at least, the size of a church is pretty irrelevant as long as the people in it are clear on their reason for being, that they have a cause they pursue that is consistent with the concept of abiding in Jesus. So, what does that even mean? Well, to abide simply means, of course, to live in, to inhabit, to be, to represent, to be the expression of. How do we do that? It's not rocket science to look at the life of Jesus and what he said and did and understand that he embodied how we should strive to live, how we should abide. What does that look like? In my estimation, it looks like welcoming and loving each other and welcoming and loving others who have been unloved, people who have been unwelcomed, people who know that they're spiritual creatures, but who just haven't found acceptance and belonging elsewhere. It looks like providing healing and wholeness to anyone who's suffering. It looks like challenging the status quo, standing up for justice. To cut to the chase, abiding in Jesus looks like loving our neighbors as we need to be loved. I think it's as simple as that. That's what it means to bear fruit. And that fruit is very simply love. That's our cause. Being human, though, means we can lose sight of that. For one thing, loving others is a long-term project. It's a lot like a vineyard. The whole purpose of a vineyard is to grow something for others to enjoy. That's a simple cause to have, and it creates the dynamic for how the vineyard operates. The vine grower, she's not growing grapes just for herself and for her own enjoyment, but for the sake of others. If she were to decide, though, that growing grapes is something she's doing strictly for herself, that she's going to make wine and store it and never share it, well, then that changes things. Or if she were to believe it's best to keep growing the same variety of grapes year after year after year because that's what suits her particular taste, or that she understands the purpose of having a vineyard is to preserve it as it always has been and always will be, and never experiment with new techniques of grape growing. And if other people don't like that, then that's their problem, not hers. That'll change things too. Either way, she's going to go out of business soon because she's lost sight of her cause, to bring people joy. I think we can learn a lot and be reawakened to focus on what our cause is by studying examples of other types of organizations beyond the church. After all, that's exactly what Jesus was doing whenever he spoke in metaphors, if it worked for him. You know. Anyway, about a year ago, I read a great book called The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. I've mentioned Simon before. He's one of those writers where I'll be reading along and I have to stop and slap my forehead and laugh and say, that's so simple, but so right. Why didn't I see it that way before? It's kind of like finding a favorite pair of socks you thought you'd lost forever. But much, much better than that. Anyway, in the book, Simon writes about the company Victorinox, the maker of the Swiss Army knife. He says the guiding principle at Victorinox is to create great products people will love. That's it. It's that simple. The Swiss Army knife was hugely popular. People clearly loved it. But after 9/11, it was banned from carry-on luggage, and you certainly couldn't have one in your pocket or purse if you were getting onto an airplane. So their sales plummeted. Before 9/11, Swiss Army knives accounted for 95% of their revenue at Victorinox. So what do you do when you're no longer able to sell the very thing you're known for, when the demand just drops off a cliff? Well, at Victorinox, they focused on their basic operating principle, their cause, which was to simply create great products people will love. So, people aren't buying Swiss Army knives like they used to? No problem. They took their brand and began making watches, fragrances, and travel accessories designed in ways that people would love. It's now a far stronger company, and knives only make up about 35% of their revenue. Now that's a simple example, and you might think, well, of course they did that. What other choice did they have? They had choices. They could have said, Swiss Army knives are our bread and butter. That's what we do. It's what we're known for. So we're going to just keep on making this thing in exactly the same way, and regardless of this problem, and hope it goes away. And in the meantime, we'll have to fire a lot of employees because we won't be selling as many knives. But thankfully for them, they didn't do that, because they knew that ultimately they were not in the Swiss Army knife business. They're in the business of making stuff people love. That is their long-haul guiding principle, their cause, their vine. Simon Sinek writes that a cause must also be just. In other words, it's built around something that's the right thing to do for others. That's what justice means, It's a huge biblical principle over and over again, doing to others what you would have done to you. And a just cause is inspirational. It looks forward to a better future. It tells everyone who's involved why they're involved and what they're working toward. A just cause is also inclusive and bold and idealistic. It's resilient, so it's able to withstand changes that inevitably come down the road, such as a lot fewer Swiss Army knives are being bought. Affirming and pursuing your just cause, which is always focused on others, means that you not only survive, but you thrive. And paradoxically, a just cause is never about the organization itself. It's not about self-preservation. It is not inwardly focused. It's not about surviving and thriving. That's just a natural outcome. A just cause is about what the value of whatever it is you do brings to others. A couple summers ago, I was out in front of the church. I may have told this story before. But I was putting up a banner promoting an event. It might have been for the blessing of the animals or something. Anyway, a man driving up pulls over, rolls down his window, and says, "Are you the pastor here?" I walk over and I said, "Yes," and introduced myself, and he told me he wanted to stop and simply say thanks. "For what?" I said. He pointed to the rainbow flag we have flying on the church's front entry. He said, "For that. I don't live here in town, but I tell everyone I know around here that there's actually a church that welcomes everybody. You have no idea what that means to people, just to know that. They can hardly believe it's true, but I tell them, no, it is true." And he drove off, and I was left standing there, pondering what had just happened. I think it was a moment when I got to witness firsthand what happens when we pursue the just cause of welcoming and accepting and loving and serving others, when we try our best to abide in Jesus and be connected to the vine. It felt like bearing fruit, producing something that brings joy to others. It felt like love. It still does. Not just that flag, but everything it represents and everything we do together that bears fruit. And with our joyful work and God's help, we will keep on bearing it.